The community is critical for what we do, because at the end of the day, why we're doing this is to try to help the cancer patients. Okay, so this is just my disclosures. I've been fortunate to be involved in a number of the companies that are now embarked on the development of KRAS inhibitors. Okay, so this is a outline of what I want to cover today. And so the first question I want to address is, what is KRAS? And so KRAS is actually one of 3 RAS genes. But it is perhaps the most significant one in cancer because of the 3 RAS genes. They're all mutated in cancer, but KRAS is the king of RAS genes. It's the most commonly mutated of the 3 RAS genes in cancer. And so the additional basis for KRAS importance relative to the others is that when one looks at the frequency of the 3 different RAS genes here, by far, KRAS is the most commonly mutated. It's mutated overall in about 80% of all cancers. And the other important thing is, if you look, the panel on the right is a list of the major causes of cancer deaths in the US. Numbers 1, 2, and 3 are lung, colon, and pancreatic cancer. These cancers have the highest frequency of KRAS mutations, and KRAS dominates the landscape of the genetic mutations in these cancers. Okay, so just a brief glimpse into what KRAS does. Cancers have not 1 mutation or 2 mutations. They have many mutations. And this panel here on the left just indicates that different cancers have different mutations. But the key thing that you need to know is, of all the genetic mutations in cancer, KRAS is the king of mutations, as indicated in this cloud image here on the bottom right. And so because of the significant frequency of KRAS in cancers, in particular, are major causes of cancer deaths, many in the cancer field believe that this is one of the key holy grails of cancer drug discovery. So just a little bit of science here for you. I don't want to get into this too much, but because G12C is now a mutation that's talked about, I just want to emphasize that G12C is but one of multiple mutations in RAS, and that there are multiple hotspots in the protein, shown here on the right, where these mutations occur. So there are a number of mutations, and this becomes important as we talk about targeting KRAS in cancer treatment. Okay, so this is KRAS made simple. What KRAS does is actually, it works as a simple on-off switch. When it's on, cells grow. When it's off, cells stop growing. And normal cells maintain some control over their growth. In contrast, in cancer cells, KRAS is mutated. And basically, the net consequence of mutations in KRAS is that this on-off switch is stuck on the on position and resulting in cancer cells, which now have uncontrolled growth. So moving on to the second topic, drugging KRAS. So KRAS, we've known about KRAS now for nearly 4 decades, discovered in 1982. So where do we now stand in developing KRAS drugs? So I'd like to call the journey that we have taken as researchers the long and winding road. And those of you may recognize that I stole this from the Beatles' 20th and last #1 hit. And when Paul McCartney, who wrote this song, was asked, what's the significance of the long and winding road? He said, it's all about the unattainable, the door you never quite reach, the road that you never get to the end of. Well, for many of us in the RAS field who have been desperately searching for the elusive anti-RAS drug, it seems as if we can't seem to quite get to the finish line. So just a bit of information about the process of drug discovery. Drug discovery is indeed a long and winding road. There are many steps in the process, from the initial identification of a mutation in cancer. And then you go through many steps in developing drugs. And then you test them in cell culture models and in animal models. You go through clinical trials. And if the results are promising, hopefully the FDA will approve the treatment for cancer. So this is a long and winding road because on the average, it takes at least 10 years for a new medicine to complete the journey from the initial discovery to the marketplace. And so why does it take so long? Well, there are many steps. But the other thing I want to emphasize is that the odds of success are very, very low. For every 10 to 15,000 ideas that we have in the research bench, only one will actually succeed and traverse through all the important steps in trying to determine whether this is an effective approach for cancer treatment. So 1 in 10 to 15,000, these are terrible odds. Now, they're certainly better than your odds of winning the lottery or being hit by a meteor. However, you're more likely to be hit by a car or by lightning or winning on the slot machine jackpot than making a successful drug. So the point is to emphasize that this is a tough business. Okay, so long and winding road. I've been on this road since the very beginning. And it's clear that we have at many times underestimated the complexities of RAS. We certainly have made mistakes. We've had misconceptions and we've had missteps. So in this long and winding road, because of the failures along the way, RAS developed a reputation as an undruggable target. And so one of the reasons people consider it undruggable is when one looks at the protein, it simply is not attractive for drug development. My colleague at UNC, Adrienne Cox, when she was interviewed on National Public Radio to talk about efforts to try to develop KRAS inhibitors, she said RAS is a greasy ball, meaning it's something that's really hard to get a hold of. Okay, so because of some of the challenges that we have faced to develop anti-RAS drugs, sometimes in the field, we have considered this potentially an impossible mission. Okay, so we have certainly tried many different strategies, and this slide here just summarizes some of the key strategies that have been taken through the decades to make KRAS drugs. What I'd like to emphasize in this presentation is the number 2, the direct inhibitors of RAS. And so the reason I bring this one up is because this is where the breakthrough began. So seminal studies by Keyvan Shokat and colleagues back in 2013 made a remarkable and amazing discovery, and he identified the first small molecule that can bind to RAS and block RAS function. So this set off tremendous excitement in the pharmaceutical industry, and many companies then embarked on pursuing the advanced development based on the Shokat observations to develop KRAS G12C inhibitors. And so in 2021, a milestone in KRAS drug discovery was achieved. The very first KRAS inhibitor was finally approved for the treatment of cancer. Now, I should emphasize that the very first KRAS inhibitor does not target all KRAS mutations. It targets only one mutation called G12C. And additionally, so far, it's only approved for the treatment of lung cancer patients with this mutation. There are additional KRAS G12C inhibitors that are now being evaluated in the clinic, and hopefully soon a second one will be approved and perhaps more to come. So let me bring you up to today and where we imagine the future to be. So with this milestone discovery of the very first KRAS drug, are we done now? Have we finally climbed the Mount Everest of cancer research? While this is certainly an important milestone, we have many questions that we still have to answer. First of all, not every lung cancer patient with this mutation responds. Only about 35 to 40% of patients respond. So the question is, why do the other some 60% of lung cancer patients with this mutation not respond? Can we figure this out and then determine and then make them respond to the drug? I tell you, it's only been approved for lung cancer. Can we extend the success of these drugs to cancers beyond lung cancer, such as colorectal cancer, pancreatic cancer, and so forth? The other thing is, I emphasize that the current drug is only approved to target only one KRAS mutation. There are many KRAS mutations, as I mentioned at the beginning, and there are also mutations in the other RAS genes as well. Are we going to be able to develop drugs to target other RAS mutations? And the last issue, of course, is one that we face all the time in oncology drug development. Will resistance be a limitation? So, and with regard to that last question, indeed, despite the dramatic results that are being seen with the KRAS G12C inhibitor, shortly thereafter, reports that the patients who responded initially relapse and they develop resistance to the treatment. So on the average, patients respond for about 6 months until the cancer comes back. This is not a surprise because essentially all oncology drugs are limited by treatment-associated drug resistance. And so at this point, the solution to this is drug combinations. And this is the classic approach in cancer chemotherapy, to develop cocktails of drugs to make the combination much more effective. So the ongoing clinical trials now are not just evaluating KRAS G12C inhibitors, but these inhibitors with combinations of many other drugs. So these are ongoing studies, and fingers crossed that some of these combinations will help advance and make these type of treatments much more long-term, much more durable, and hopefully resist the concept of drug resistance. Okay, so what about other RAS mutations? These are exciting times. There are many companies that have now embarked on the development of even more KRAS inhibitors, and we now have some early stage preclinical findings that say that, yes, we can develop inhibitors against other RAS mutations. So the clinical trials to test these other KRAS inhibitors are now beginning. And so these are certainly exciting times. And with a bit of luck, hopefully we will soon have KRAS inhibitors, not just to target KRAS G12C, but other RAS mutations as well. So let me just end by saying that KRAS has certainly been a major challenge. I've done research on KRAS now for 4 decades. I borrowed this quote from Winston Churchill, and I call KRAS a riddle wrapped in a mystery inside an enigma. And so while we have learned a lot about KRAS, and we have now succeeded in developing at least one KRAS inhibitor, we are still in the early days of KRAS drug discovery. So while these are exciting times, I want to caution that we still have a long ways to go. And so we anticipate that we will continue to learn and that there will be more surprises to come. So I think we're just seeing the tip of the iceberg of what KRAS is. And as we begin to understand further what KRAS does, we will hopefully be able to harness this information and develop even more effective KRAS therapies. So I'll stop there, and I thank you very much for your attention.
That was wonderful. Thank you so much, Channing. I really appreciate your being able to kind of like highlight some of the different things and how we kind of got where we are here today. Do you have a minute to answer a couple of questions and kind of give us a little bit of guidance and your expert tutelage, as it were?
Of course.
Okay, well that's great. Now, I'm not sure how promising it makes it sound when you're like, oh, I have a better chance of winning at a slot machine than I do of getting my drug approved. So, but I also know from real life experience, you can't win if you don't play. So it looks from your slide like there's an awful lot of people in the field. Can you kind of like just go over what your thoughts are on that?
Yes. So you're completely correct. Despite the fact that when we, as researchers, have looked at RAS, and it has been a daunting and challenging, and if not scary, and very humbling situation. But the reason many of us go into research is because we like the challenge. We want to do something that has never been done before. And because of that, we have stuck with it, and we have done research over the last 4 decades to try to do something which many people considered impossible. And so with the successes in recent years, the number of researchers that have now continued to come into the field is just remarkable. In my 40 years of research on RAS, I've never seen the level of enthusiasm and excitement in terms of trying to push the needle further to develop even more KRAS inhibitors. So yes, it is a tough challenge, but us researchers are excited at the odds, despite the low odds, and continue to make significant efforts in these studies.
Oh, okay. Well, that's a good answer. And so we need more to keep playing, and the competition in this field is a good thing. So even though it makes it a little bit more complicated and hard for us to understand at a patient level, because let's be real, none of us knew about KRAS until we in fact got diagnosed with something having to do with it, which is a cancer of some sort. We need them to keep going. Okay, I can see we've got a couple questions in the chat, so I'm going to read the question to you, and so we can kind of then I'll let you see if you've got any information around it. And it says, good morning from Canada. Oh, okay. Thank you for putting all this together. Let's kick cancer's KRAS. Don't worry. We're not going to let you get out of here without saying that too. So just like a heads up. So like you can start warming up a little bit. Okay. With this cold, damp weather that we're all facing. Okay. And see, that's kind of not really your thing about the clinical trial and study specifically targeting any of the particular specific mutations. If you know anything that you'd like to kind of like share around that, that'd be fantastic.
So most of the activity right now is against the KRAS G12C mutation, which is the most common mutation in lung cancer. Unfortunately, for other cancers, this mutation is relatively rare. In particular, pancreatic cancer, where virtually every pancreatic cancer has a KRAS mutation. Unfortunately, the G12C mutation represents but 2% of KRAS mutations in pancreatic cancer. But there's hope. And a new KRAS inhibitor entered clinical evaluation back in June. And this KRAS inhibitor is developed by Revolution Medicines. And this KRAS inhibitor can potentially target every KRAS mutation. And so the trials have just begun. People are really, really excited to see what's going to come of these, because if this drug works, then we could potentially treat every patient with a KRAS mutation, not just those with G12C mutations, but any KRAS mutation, and potentially even an NRAS mutation or a HRAS mutation. So that is certainly one of the most exciting ones out there. There are several companies that have drugs that target G12D. G12D is the most common KRAS mutation. It's the most common one in virtually every cancer, from pancreatic to colorectal cancers. And so that is another one that is generating considerable excitement, and it's expected that some of these will begin entering clinical trials towards the end of this year.
That is exciting. And the reality of it is that what we've seen, okay, and by we, I'm almost including myself in an inappropriate group, because as a patient, I'm just looking for what's going to help me, what's going to help the community. But I know that you're able to kind of like stand back and take a look and see what's helping all of us. community-wise, right? You're looking at the whole big group of the ocean that we're able to face. And so I'm excited. I mean, I'm not like just a little excited. I'm really excited that we had the breakthrough. We had the initial start, and we're able to start looking at how we can start attacking those pathways using combination therapies. And I think that really is just truly where it's going to be going. Let me kind of glance around the room. Does anybody in the room have a particular question? Like, I'll just walk up to you with a microphone, because like, I'm not afraid to just put you all on the spot. Does anybody have a question though? Yes, come on, don't be shy. I promise y'all, they're going to get a little bit more enthused as the day wears on. We get them a little bit more caffeinated, a little bit more warmed up. We do have a question, and this is an excellent question. It says, can you please explain the difference between HRAS, NRAS, and KRAS? And what is it just go do your professor thing and tell us the difference, please.
So KRAS, HRAS, and NRAS, they're all genes that they share a lot of relationships, and that's why they share a similar name. They're all mutated in cancers, but they're mutated in different cancers. So I mentioned that KRAS is most commonly mutated in cancers such as pancreatic, lung, and colorectal cancer. NRAS is not common in these cancers, but we see NRAS mutations more commonly in melanomas, acute myelogenous leukemias. HRAS is found in yet different types of cancers. HRAS mutations are found, for example, in head and neck squamous cell carcinoma, bladder cancers, and several other cancers. And so the different RAS mutations all do the same thing. They're all cancer drivers. They all cause cancer, but they seem to occur in different types of cancers. And we don't know yet why that is the case. We suspect is that they each do something slightly different.
Is it ever possible for like one of those NRASs, HRASs, or anything to turn into a KRAS?
So that's an interesting question. Some of the patients that have been treated with the KRAS G12C drug have acquired resistance mechanisms that involve mutations in NRAS. So yes, there certainly is crosstalk between the different RAS genes.
Okay, and does that only happen as a result of being on a medication?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that again?
Does that only happen, or does it get that acquired resistance or change the mutation only as a result of being on a medication, or does it happen spontaneously?
That's an excellent question, and the answer is probably both. Some mutations are pre-existing, and some mutations are likely due to the treatment itself. The thing you have to understand is that cancers are genetically very unstable. They're like genetic time bombs, and they accumulate mutations at a rapid rate. And this allows them to escape treatment with different drugs. And so the resistance mechanisms are both present and pre-existing, but also caused by the treatment itself.
Okay. And one last question. All right. Well, actually, one last question, and then we're going to get your request. Okay. So this KRAS is something that happens in our body naturally. And then it starts out like everybody's got a KRAS thing, and you keep referring to the genetics. Is the genetics part of this mean that can be passed on to my kids?
Yeah. So that's an important question that I think people need to understand. So KRAS is actually a good gene, but when it gets mutated, it becomes a bad gene. And so we all actually need KRAS to develop as normal humans. It's when it becomes mutated. So cancer basically is a process where good genes become bad genes.
Okay. Well, I think that was an excellent way of answering. Oh, you have a question? Hang on. We're going to put you on microphone.
And how does the cancer get mutated? Like, what are some of the factors that make it grow or spread?
Okay, so KRAS becomes mutated. So majority of people do not have the KRAS mutation when they're born. It usually occurs during your life. And the mutations occur due to environmental carcinogens. So for example, the KRAS G12C mutation, I mentioned that it is the most common one in lung cancer. It is a cigarette smoking associated mutation. So different carcinogens will cause different KRAS mutations in different cancers. Now, the RAS mutation alone is not enough to cause cancer. You need additional mutations in other genes before cancer arises. And that in general is why cancer is a disease of old age. You need to accumulate multiple mutations. The general guess is that you need 5 to 10 mutated genes to have a full-blown cancer. So KRAS mutations alone are not enough, and you need to accumulate additional mutations in other genes. And so while cancers require the mutations in many genes, the good news is that if you can correct just one of them, for example, the KRAS mutation, that alone is enough to collapse the cancer.
Okay, well, we could stay here all day asking you a whole bunch of questions because you're just so great at answering the questions, and we really appreciate that. But we're not going to let you get out of here. I don't know if the other folks that are here remember what we did last year, but we asked our speakers to participate in a quick little video snippet where they got to say "Kick Cancer's KRAS," and we got to do it together in a room. And it's not that we really want to cheer. It's just really that we want to feel like you know how important this is to us and for all of us. And so if the room will cooperate with me in doing that, and you would do it as well, I kind of like do a whole count off thing. Okay. And so we like 1, 2, 3, and then kick cancer's KRAS. Y'all with me on that? Okay. All right. All right. Here we go, y'all. 1, 2, 3. Kick cancer's KRAS. All right, you guys. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us this morning, Channing. And I hope to see you again. Stay warm and stay safe.